All right, well, welcome back. Now, there's a piece that's doing its rounds on Bloomberg's website, Bloomberg.com, that says, forget emerging markets. The hot topic at Davos 2015 is the United States. Now, if this is true, this is very worrying for the African continent, which always uses the annual meeting to highlight African economic issues. Now, the meeting starts this coming Wednesday. It runs until Saturday. And to give us a perspective is the chairman and CEO of Africa Investor, Hubert Danso. It's good to have you. Welcome back to studio.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Hubert, any truth in this? Forget about emerging markets. This is all about the US this year?
Not really at all.
Okay.
I don't really follow that narrative there. I think it's really all about potential growth and managing risks in a very dynamic and evolving environment. And hence the theme for this year's summit is really the new global context. And they're really going to be breaking it down into sort of four sort of subcategories. So they're going to be looking at society and security. They're going to be looking at, growth and stability, innovation and industry. Those types of topics are really going to be at the forefront of the agenda.
Okay.
Crisis and how those types of issues are managed.
Yeah. Let's look at some delegates and whether it be from business or from governments. What will they be looking to gain from Davos?
Well, I think first of all, they're going to have to do a great deal of stock taking because we're really in unprecedented times. Each of these issues that we're seeing in terms of the oil prices, in terms of the conflicts, in terms of the geopolitical issues, we've seen them before in some shape or form, but we haven't necessarily seen them all at the same time. So I think there's going to be a lot of stock taking and networking taking place to better understand those issues. But more importantly, there's going to be a lot of deals being struck on the side, hopefully around the area of major infrastructure investments where global capital is really going to be searching for growth. And the continent is the destination that offers that growth.
Yeah. In your opinion, what do African leaders need to do to build an investable entrepreneurial class?
Well, I think we need to recognize that as we seek to attract foreign direct investment, foreign investors, the first thing they look for when they come into the continent, or even domestic investors from one country in the continent to the next, is really how do you treat your local private sector? So I think really creating more incentives, beginning to reward and create a more hospitable environment for the local business community is going to be imperative. And that's the same terms, leveling the playing fields, giving the same sorts of incentives for local business as foreign businesses get.
Which African countries are really getting a lot of the attention and the crux of this pie right now?
Well, I think it's South Africa clearly is going there with a very high-powered delegation and a great number of ministers, some serious business leaders, three very clear and specific messages that are linked into the National Development Plan. Firstly, that South Africa is the investment destination of choice. Secondly, that integration in Africa must be a priority, particularly through direct investments. And thirdly, that, whenever South Africa negotiates an international agreement, it really must take account of the development agenda for the South. And I think Ghana is coming with the same sort of message, so is Tanzania, so is Kenya, and a number of other countries. Mozambique is hot on the lips of a great number of the investors at the present time.
Yeah. Instability must also be a bit of a worry. I mean, you look at the largest economy in Africa, and we're talking about Nigeria. That certainly, I imagine, raising a little bit of concerns, even moving into Davos.
Absolutely. I mean, it was, unfortunately, there was a lot of concern last year as Nigeria was about to host its first World Economic Forum on Africa in May, going into Davos last year around this same sort of time. So it's just unfortunate that it continues. But I think it's an opportunity for the business community to redouble their efforts to work with governments, and it's good to see that the governments, particularly in ECOWAS, are now coming together to think about some kind of unified action against this scourge.
Yeah. Let's look at some of the issues that Africa will be taking to Davos. What do you think is on the top of the agenda?
It's got to be integration, and it's got to be attracting investment into the types of cross-border infrastructure-related opportunities that can really heighten and increase Africa's growth and give investors anywhere between 15 to 25% return on infrastructure investments, where they're typically used to getting between 7 and 12 in OECD markets. So I think that's really going to be a catalyst for for job creation in the continent, and as well as sort of increasing the continent's global competitiveness.
Yeah. Just finally, I know that I mentioned it in the news bulletin, ending it off, talking about the price of Brent crude and what we're looking at. And I mean, it's good for us filling up our vehicles, that it's getting a lot cheaper, which is lovely. And we're seeing all of these petrol price drops. But, you know, for other producers around the world, and let's focus in on Africa, what is it doing, the price, in terms of competitiveness and losing out on business for a lot of countries?
Well, it really means we have to go back to the drawing board in some respects, because I think some key markets, some of the obvious larger oil producing markets, have become very reliant and perhaps not diversified into the non-oil sectors and put enough investment and enough focus onto those particular markets and sectors. So I think now this is really going to cause the governments to reevaluate those opportunities in those sectors. It's hurting. It's hurting the currencies, it's hurting some of the market opportunities and the competitiveness. But again, I think it's really, you know, a sign of the times now that the governments really need to look more at the agribusiness sector, the infrastructure sector, the high-tech opportunities, to diversify and get a better quality of GDP growth, a different quality that can create better quality jobs.
What about the US? I mean, they're also getting bad repercussions because of this oil price.
Yes, well, I think the US is strategically in a position to be able to take care of itself. I think it's the implications for the rest of the continent in terms of, let's ensure that it doesn't take us off of our integration, regional economic integration agenda. Because let's not forget, we're only at about 12% regional trade. We're at 5% intra-African investment. And while all of these global downturns are taking place, this is really the opportunity for the continent to really be focusing on those key underlying growth factors, those growth poles, and the opportunity to build that infrastructure that can actually catapult our growth even larger. If we're at, anywhere between 4 and 7% now, with poor infrastructure, low energy, poor road and transport networks, imagine what we could be if that investment was put in place.
Yeah, most certainly. Thank you very much for your interesting perspective. And we look forward to it. Starting on Wednesday up until Saturday, this is where we're going to see Davos meeting. And Hubert Danso, the CEO and chairman of Africa Investor, giving us a bit of a heads up ahead of this. So thanks very much for being our guest. All right, the time now is 6:30. Let's jump into your news headlines.